Greetings. I am M.J. Bozia, Executive Director of the International Studies Association. With me are ISA President Siba Grovegui, Virtual Conference Program Chairs Matthew Waits and Katya Comfortini, Conference Best Paper Award Committee Chair Jacqueline Brayboy Wagner, and the recipient of the Best Paper Award for last year's conference. We welcome you to the third annual virtual conference and the second I have introduced since arriving as Executive Director a year ago. I am very proud of the direction ISA has taken in terms of our virtual programming, and I am privileged to work with the staff, including Lauren Perez Bonilla and the virtual conference team, Sarah Dorr and the professional development team, and Adelina Mkame and the group conference team. Together, we work to implement and reimagine the variety of platforms available to our members and scholars on international and comparative studies more generally, and to do so with knowledge that our membership and our scholars reside around the world. ISA has come a long way from the origins of our discipline and our association in the Cold War. Often, it is a difficult journey. At the same time, I appreciate the community I have found in ISA as a first-generation university graduate, a scholar of global LGBTQI politics, with a significant personal and professional history with neurodivergence, and the methodology driven by my own unique processes of analysis and observation, and someone who is gay and non-binary who first came out in the early years of the AIDS pandemic. Among my ISA community are Matthew Waits and Katya Comfortini. I was so pleased they accepted the invitation of the presidents to serve as program chairs. I knew their commitment to equity, diversity, inclusion, and critical rigor in our association and disciplines would push further innovation in the virtual conference. Under their leadership, we have taken a leap forward in achieving these goals, both in terms of accessibility and scholarly content. I also want to thank Siba Grovegui and the outgoing president, Marika Bruning, for their leadership on the program call. Despite their different approaches to research and analysis, they came together in a criticism of established theorizing and their emphasis on the real worlds that are the imperative for the dialogue at this iteration of the conference. As well, we owe Marika a much appreciation for her leadership in establishing the Conference Best Paper Award. I've known Jacqueline Brayboy Wagner for some time as members of ISA, and her leadership is inspiring for many of us. Thank you, Jackie, for chairing the award committee. In the first year of my 5-year term as executive director, ISA is facing a number of serious and existential challenges, along with higher education, the social sciences, and the humanities more generally. Knowledge is no longer an admired process of accumulated wisdom in the service of society, but again, returning to the darkest days of the 20th century, an object of a coordinated political and economic attack. Our work is either undervalued or cynically treated as disposable. In the place of knowledge, we have conspiracy theories, algorithms, and so-called artificial intelligence as a new coalition driving human understandings of the world we all must share. In response, ISA is emphasizing innovation, reform when possible, and reimagining when necessary. Everything we do is on the table as we seek viable approaches to amplify our role in providing to our members the tools for rewarding careers and in building the knowledge which is the only foundation for a better world, one in which international norms are respected by all actors. Peace is an achievable goal and not an exception. Human and environmental rights are assumed and not contested. Global inequality, all forms, is limited, and the world itself is sustainable for all who live on it.
Hi, my name is Siba Grovegui. I am professor at Cornell in the Department of Africana Studies and affiliated with the Department of Government. I wish to thank everybody who made this virtual conference happen, beginning with the staff at headquarters, all the wonderful people without whom the ISA will not actually function, who are invisible to us, but who make everything happen here. I also wanted to thank MJ, Mike Bozia, our current executive director. I had the privilege this year of being elected president of the ISA, which in itself was momentous because though I hate to say it, was the first time somebody from the Black diaspora was elected at the ISA, and I took that as a privilege and an honor. And I thank all of my colleagues for making that happen. I think it shows maturity at the ISA. It shows that the ISA is becoming truly global, even though, to be honest, I also profess in the US, which is part of the global North. When I was asked to choose a theme for this year's conference, the larger conference in Columbus, I said back to the fundamentals. A lot of people were a bit surprised because they did not know what that meant. Many, I suppose, and I presume, and I think I'm correct, assumed that I was going to say decolonizing or something of the sort. Of course, my entire profession career has been spent in revisiting the canons, by which we often mean Western canons and the traditions. But I wanted to be more inclusive because there are many sections of the ISA to whom the discipline means a lot, only if it can be open to take their concerns into question. We all have concerns about the state of the world, and they come from multiple sides, multiple perspectives, and multiple horizons. The fundamentals for me meant returning to the world itself, not the fundament of a particular tradition, which is how the fundamentals are often understood, by which I meant the fundament of Western canons and their archives. But I wanted to return to the fundamentals, to revisit the manner in which the world was put together even before European hegemony. When in every region of the world, take the Strait of Malacca, the Indian Ocean, what we now call Australia, and the New World, empires, state-like entities emerged, and there were relations in all of those spaces before Europe showed up, before European ascent to hegemony. And I think that is worth considering what that meant. What that means to me as a scholar suggests picking up on the Roman term ius commune in the context applying to public law, that in every region, every sphere of the world, people had actually managed to come up with norms, rules, law-like regulations to make their lives together more congenial, to allow them to make connections, to have exchanges, and to settle wars when they had them, but most fundamentally, to have a modicum of justice and peace. And so, for instance, for me, that should be evident to everybody who's reading Western canons. If you read Grotius, for instance, in Mare Liberum, the site of that debate is the Strait of Malacca in a context that opposes the Dutch and the Portuguese over whether the laws should be free, which in itself is already ironic, because those two entities are there precisely because the Strait of Malacca was already open seas. So what freedom meant to the Portuguese and the Dutch later was very different from what happened in the Strait of Malacca before them. The same can be said about the New World. It can be said about Africa. that there were prior exchanges, that our discipline should omit all of those and pretend in certain traditions, whether they're American or British traditions or French, to think that the world, international society, international community is the only and sole result of modern processes is actually a mistake. When I say returning to the fundamentals, it was for me a way of asking ourselves to go back to something simpler, which is for me, how, whether one assumes that Europe brought law and civilization to other people, how did those people they encountered made sense of their laws, of their treaties, of their impositions, whether they fought them or not? It is because there were already in place communicable languages that pertain to those. So human faculty, we know, no matter where they were in time, were always capable of communicating and of relating. So for those who don't understand that this was a much trickier proposition to return to the fundamentals, I wish to say that I actually meant to trick people in both directions. For those people who think that the canons such as they are problematic, I wanted to say to them that they may be mistaken in one singular respect. Coming from Africa, when I hear about the archives, I'm always tempted to remind people that from Diogenes onward, Thales, Pythagoras, etc., that every Greek philosopher went to Africa, didn't just visit, but stayed for a while. That our interlocutors were the Greeks. And that in fact, the Greeks were rediscovered by Europeans through those Moors who were in Andalusia in Spain. And so the archives are actually ours. What European made of them are the canons, and those are theirs. And I want to emphasize the canons because the world has never been as separate, except for the New World, as we imagine. Ideas of diplomacy, of solidarity, of hospitality, even the rules of war had been far more shared by communities around the world than we imagine today. Our cafe cultures may appear very new to us, but the caravanserais from Persia were the first instances of that. Along those caravanserais, people started serving coffee, of course, coffee from Arabia, along the roads and roadsides, and of course, that gave us the cafes. Hindus and Chinese in diplomacy, the dragomans in the Ottoman Empire. So when I say return to the fundamentals, I did not just mean to make a list. I wanted us to see what prompted populations, peoples, nations, empires, principalities, etc., around the world, what prompted them to come up with the ideas that they imagine would work for them in their context, and perhaps as a way of opening our minds to how restricted European canons have made our horizons. That our horizons have become narrow, our imaginary is constricted, and therefore our solutions nearly incomprehensible sometimes to some. That was on the side of those people who thought that I should come up with a theme called decolonial, post-colonial, and the like. On the other side, on the other hand, those people, there were also people who were tempted, as I heard through the grapevine, people were tempted to imagine that when I said back to the fundamentals, I meant something in the old cliches Western, because those are the fundament to the canons, to disciplinary practices, and et cetera, et cetera. I did not intend anything of that. I intended, in fact, to say that there's a lot of work to be done on that side too. For instance, it is perverse, ironic, I don't know which is correct terms here, that everywhere we go, France, Britain, the US, Australia, Canada, international relations reads almost as an extension of those countries' foreign policies and traditions. They do not, sadly, take into account the human trajectory as a whole. And that human trajectory for me is what should be illuminating to us. The particular foreign policies matter. The particular diplomatic entities matter, for sure. The violence that underscore the modern world matter, we should take them. But above all, the human genius. Is for me what is more important, because it brings us to the idea of intelligibility, of relatability, and quite frankly, of the universal. Not universalism, but the universal. Of the human, not humanity, but the human. And I say those because the universalism and humanity have already been encoded in very, very problematic ways, such that a lot of people wish to distance themselves from that. But we can only relate to language because we are human. And we can only comprehend things in the same fashion. Our ability to digest, to comprehend, to react, our sentiment, even affect, all those make us human in a particular way. And the human, therefore, at this moment in history in particular, needs to be revisited. What it is to be human today in the modern world of capitalist exploitation, of state violence, of communal exclusion, of gender discrimination, misogyny, patriarchy, etc., and of violence toward people who are of different sexual orientation. I think that in all those cases, the question of the human matters. The universal simply means that when human beings are brought together, they are capable, fundamentally, to relate to one another, to comprehend other people's thought processes, and to make sense of them, as long as the parameters of the language are understood by them. In fact, we know that in the New World because you had pidgin languages in the world, Creole in the New World, but also the Sabir in the Mediterranean, and of course on the Indian coast of Africa, Kiswahili, or Swahili, I should say. So humans are capable of communicating, and I think we have done ourselves a disservice by taking on traditions that are essentially, and I hate to say it, but misanthropic. Our discipline, the canons of it at least, have selectively taken from our past ideas, ethical constructs that are fundamentally misanthropic. For instance, in realism, not to pick on realism here, but in realism, the ideas of human nature, human condition, no, not human condition, the state of nature and human nature. Those are very problematic because people are not just guided by the desire to take from other people. Europeans will not have survived in Africa, in the New World, in Australia, for those who first went there, if people there did not understand ideas of hospitality or solidarity. I don't want to go off script here, but just Thanksgiving. We actually have, even in folklore, ideas that people were able to accept other people. What happens are matters of institutions, of morality, of dispositions, and those are not human. They are of the communities that stitched those sentiments, ideas, pragmatism together in the way that they appeared. They are human in that way, but they do not reflect human nature. Some humans acted and oriented themselves. That way give them the institution and the instrument to do the things that they did in the manner that they did it, whether it was empire, colonialism, enslavement, and etc., etc. But those were not, they do not exhaust what it means to be human, and their faculties and the capacities are not exhaustive of what the human is capable of. And so the fundamentals for me were a way of saying that we have simpler questions to ask. It's the simple questions that make things fundamental about the purpose, about life and the purpose of life, and how we think of the role of states, communities, international systems in that context, in those contexts. How do we save the human? It is the most basic question that we must ask today, because we are, sadly, we live in a time, sadly, where violence has exceeded our moral capacities to judge, in fact, as moral. Environmental catastrophe awaits us. The world is overpopulated. New technology on the horizon that seem to actually make us less and less agents of our own future. And so if you are to save ourselves, if you are to imagine a discipline of the future, we have to think of those, we have to return to those basic fundamental questions. The ones that got away from us before capitalism, before enslavement, before violence. The one that got away from us because of patriarchy, misogyny, etc. And so that is why I had desired that this virtual conference be about evidence. Evidence, for me, is actually a far more complicated proposition, but evidence is a way for us to actually speak to one another in the concrete, not through a particular perspective which we have all, but to be able to develop languages through which we can actually demonstrably point one another to what may work. I say demonstrably. That does not depend on a particular modes of cognition. We have the art, we have music, we have philosophy, we have theory, we have numbers, statistics, and etc., etc. But how we put them together and to what end? Why do we seek evidence? To what end? For what? And who generates them? Who gets to tell us what is true or not actually matters. And I'm hoping that in the few days that you have ahead of you at this virtual conference, that you relate the question of evidence to everything I've said before. Because in the end, international relations is to our world today what anthropology was to the last. Anthropology created its own subject, they were colonials. International relations should free all of us. It should make all of us citizens of the world, subject of equal right, and deserving of a better future. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Matthew Waits, one of the programme chairs for the conference from University of Glasgow in the UK.
And I am Katia Confortini, the other programme chair from Wellesley College in the US.
And we would like to warmly welcome you all to the International Studies Association's virtual conference for 2025. As programme chairs, we're honoured to have been invited to play this role, which has involved reviewing and selecting papers and panel proposals, designing panels with combinations of papers, and shaping the conference. This is the International Studies Association's third virtual conference, and in our view, the virtual conference plays an increasingly important part in the intellectual life of ISA, especially as the association seeks to look beyond North America to enable more engagement from all regions and to become more globally inclusive. In these opening remarks, we want to help you to think about what is the nature of the conference you're about to participate in. We especially want to take you through our thinking for the design of the conference, give you some initial pointers to its sessions, and reflect on the structural conditions that shape who will be here, which are important to consider for our collective knowledge production in this space.
For us as program chairs, the importance of addressing global inequalities has been central, whether conceptualized in terms of power relations between global North and global South, or between former or present colonizing states and those which have been colonized, as post-colonial and decolonial theories emphasize. This approach is reflected in sessions design. As just one example, you will find 2 panel sessions entitled New Directions in IR Theory, Perspectives from the Global South, which seek to highlight theoretical contributions to IR from the Global South. Values of equality, diversity, and inclusion have also been centrally important in how we have designed the conference program with respect to issues of power and inequality, including in relation to racial and ethnic inequalities, nationality, indigeneity, gender inequalities, sexuality, and religion, among others.
We especially note that the virtual conference provides a lower cost way to engage in ISA relative to the in-person conferences, which is centrally important in light of material socioeconomic inequalities globally. We encourage all participants to use this opportunity to engage with a globally diverse assembly that the use of online video conferencing technology makes possible. We're especially glad that after we initiated a conversation with the ISA about conference fees, the ISA virtual conference has for the first time moved away from a single universal conference fee to a variable choice of fees, where the participant selects their fee according to ability to pay, with the lowest fee now considerably lower than before. We would like to thank the ISA leadership for taking up our suggestion to reconsider the fee structure, which is a crucial step towards making the virtual conference more globally inclusive, even while further steps of various kinds will continue to be needed.
The theme of the conference is bringing evidence back in. As program chairs, we had a long discussion about the meaning of this theme, which was decided before our appointment, and we thought about the question, what is evidence? We considered whether evidence had ever been not in. What does in mean? What counts as evidence? Can theory be evidence? Can narratives be evidence? Our starting point is that we recognize that there are different views on these issues, and our approach to the selection of papers for the conference was to choose to interpret the theme as an invitation to reconsider what evidence may mean. As a result, in the roster of 243 papers for a total of 62 panels and roundtables created by your submissions, you will find a panel on the politics of memory and remembering, and another one on narrative and cultural productions. The papers in these panels include discussions on decolonizing archaeological sites, the role of collective memories of trauma in shaping small states' behavior, and the use of World War II memorial sites as foreign policy tools in Northeast Asia. Other papers present research engaging with poetry, media representations, and fiction in interstate relations. These panels and their papers capture well what Cristina Fattore, one of last year's virtual conference program chairs, observed at the opening ceremony. Stories are data with experience.
You will also find several panels and papers considering international studies from different vantage points. A roundtable on the way in which global South states are reshaping the world order, a panel on hydropolitics and security, with papers on cases from China, India, Paraguay, Brazil, and on decolonizing states' river basin agreements. We also have a panel on indigenous politics and thought, one on IR pedagogical practices across the world, and yet another on research and ethics in contested contexts. Some issues continue to be, of course, and importantly, traditional subjects of international relations scholarship and are extensively represented in the programme. Nuclear politics and nuclear security remain a central concern for the field, as evidenced by panels and several individual papers on the subject. Examples of such panels include nuclear weapons equals nuclear security, ? And nuclear acquisition, deterrence and compellence. Traditional military power, armaments and security strategies are also well-represented topics, but you will also see discussions on emergent threats, on hybrid warfare, and on new technologies.
In the crafting of the program, we have also sought to bring to light the challenges posed to the international system and the rule of law by the persistent violations of human rights and the laws of war. Proposals from authors have reminded us of the invocation, mostly by Western states, of humanitarian laws to justify military intervention, or the selective invocation of human rights standards in areas such as Sudan, Palestine, Iraq, Libya. At the same time, your submissions have underscored for us, and we hope to the attendees, the agency of individuals and groups within and beyond the states in shaping and reshaping national and international norms and laws, sometimes in opposition to and sometimes with the acquiescence of the state itself. The enduring urgency of the climate crisis has also generated several submissions, which have found space in panels on resource governance in theory and practice, on the methodological and policy challenges of scholarship on climate change, on global environmental negotiations and governance, and on climate crises and energy. Meanwhile, an emerging area of concern is on the politics of connectivity, which can be seen represented in a panel entitled Space Politics and Connectivity, from Connecting Land and Sea to Colonizing Outer Space.
The resurgence of far-right forces and authoritarian populism in many contexts creates challenges of many kinds, which play out in novel and insidious ways, as seen in the panel on artificial intelligence and digital authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is of specific concern in panels addressing gender and sexuality. From the perspective of feminist studies, we can see new formations of the discourse on gender in international politics, which is reflected in panels such as Gender Politics and Global Crises, and Gender Inequalities, Feminist Challenges, and Depatriarchalization. We also have a panel on LGBTQI+ politics and rights, an area of my own research, which highlights issues including anti-gender politics, but also LGBTQI+ rights claims in contexts such as India, Angola, and South Korea. There are many examples of current wars and conflicts which the conference programme addresses, some related to issues being investigated by the International Criminal Court concerning genocide, war crimes, or crimes against humanity. For example, there are papers related to Russia, Ukraine, and Palestine, Israel, and papers on a number of ongoing or past wars and conflicts, including in Libya, Western Sahara and Morocco, Colombia, Kosovo, and Iraq. We have papers addressing some situations that have been proposed to be genocidal, such as a paper addressing international norms and the conflict in Sudan, where particular ethnic groups have been targeted. There is also a paper concerning Rwanda, addressing post-conflict governance after that genocide. Regrettably, there are also some conflicts where a lack of submissions meant issues are not fully represented in the programme. For example, while we have a valuable paper concerning inequalities facing the Rohingya people in Myanmar in the panel on religion, ethnicity, civilization and citizenship, the issue of genocidal processes against the Rohingya could have been addressed in further papers. Absences and silences are worth reflecting about, as they are as telling of our field as the content of existing panels and papers. But there are many more issues that are represented, which we have not had time to discuss here.
As individuals and scholars who have accepted the responsibilities of program chairs, we feel compelled not to remain silent in the face of ongoing genocides. And from our position, and in this specific moment in time, we think it is appropriate for us to make some specific remarks about what we view as the current genocidal process in Gaza, even while we do not claim to speak on behalf of the ISA as a whole.
As individuals, we especially cannot ignore the role of our own governments. For Katia, the Italian and US governments, for myself, the UK government, in enabling this destruction via political and military support for Israel's actions, and the complicity of our universities via commercial and military partnerships, investments, and research. Even while the Hamas attack of October the 7th, 2023 was a horrific assault on human lives and cannot be ignored, it seems clear to us and many of our colleagues that the most central underlying problem is Israeli colonialism, and the genocide in progress has to be addressed. Since we began work as programme chairs, we've sought to address the Palestine-Israel conflict in several ways, although only some of these have been fulfilled. For example, we have sought to facilitate a showing and discussion of the film No Other Land, but this has not been possible due to circumstances facing the filmmakers who we have contacted. Nevertheless, and while constrained by submissions received, we have created a panel on the Middle East and North Africa between colonialism and conflict, which includes some related papers.
We would like to quote the statement drafted by our colleagues of the Post-Colonial and Decolonial Working Group of the British International Studies Association, titled No Conferencing as Usual During Genocide. This was for panel openings at the most recent BISA convention, and it stated, quote, "As we gather for this academic conference, we do so in the shadow of an unfolding atrocity. For over a year and a half, Israel's assault on Gaza has killed tens of thousands and displaced nearly the entire population. This is a war not only on people, but on the possibility of a future." End of quote. In a New York Times op-ed on July 15th, 2025, Brown University professor and genocide scholar Omer Bartov wrote that, quote, "Israel's actions could be understood only as the implementation of the expressed intent to make the Gaza Strip uninhabitable for its Palestinian population," end of quote. His, and I quote again, inescapable conclusion was that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinian people, end of quote. Legal groups and non-governmental organizations, including Amnesty International and the Center for Constitutional Rights, as well as over 50 governments, South Africa in primis, and various United Nations agencies, have all reached the conclusion that Israel is indeed committing genocide in Gaza.
Moreover, the UN Human Rights Council has mandated a report which documented the destruction of 90% of Gaza's schools and the destruction or damage of all of its 12 universities. That's the Human Rights Council mandated report of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel. The Israeli newspaper Haaretz estimates that 70% of all buildings in Gaza have been razed. These include museums, bookstores, libraries, archives, science labs, cultural centres, publishing houses. Hundreds, if not thousands, of students, teachers, professors, writers, and school administrators have been killed, and many more thousands of students displaced and denied an education, let alone a safe life. We concur with our Beeza colleagues that this is scholasticide, the targeted destruction of education as a tool of domination and erasure.
In many countries, including the US, Germany, China, India, Morocco, the UK, France, and Italy, our universities also participate in the ongoing and systematic repression of speech critical to Israel, significantly contributing to an already deteriorating trend in academic freedom. And this is according to the annual report of the Scholars at Risk Academic Freedom Monitoring Project in 2024. In light of this trend, and because the ISA seeks to support academic freedom, the Academic Freedom Committee of the ISA proposed to us a roundtable on policies, practices, and academic freedom at the ISA. We have included it in the program for Thursday. As universities and governments manipulate or restrict academic freedom globally, this roundtable aims to create a space for a public conversation and vigorous debate about existing ISA rules around statements and speech, particularly where contestations exist over the application of policies in specific contexts or subjects. And we're thinking here not only of contestations over the meaning of pro-Palestine speech, but also over so-called gender ideology. With the inclusion of this roundtable, we have provided a space for a democratic discussion about how ISA works, has worked, or should work. For colleagues wishing to discuss Palestine-Israel specifically and in depth, we also invite you to attend the panel on the Middle East and North Africa. To conclude, from our experience as program chairs, we believe in the potential of the virtual conference to make a distinct contribution relative to other ISA conferences, given the already more materially accessible and globally inclusive nature of this space. We are confident that this potential will also play out in the substance of your presentations, even as we are aware that conferencing as usual is probably never appropriate at ISA, given the state of our planet. We urge you to actively participate and engage in co-generating this more globally inclusive space as you join and take forward discussions and conversations during your and our colleagues' sessions. On our part, we look forward to listening and learning from and with you.
I am Dr. Lana Broderick, Associate Professor of Political Science at University of Nebraska, Omaha. On behalf of the International Studies Association and my fellow committee members, Dr. Jacqueline Braveboy Wagner and Dr. Pravin Katka, I am delighted to present the inaugural award for a Best Paper presented at the ISA Virtual Conference to Dr. Ana I. Lopez Garcia of Maastricht University and Dr. Sarah Behrens of University of Bremen for their paper titled Taxing the Wealthy in Haiti. This paper offers a compelling and timely contribution to the study of taxation in fragile and conflict-affected states with a particular focus on this small Caribbean island. Employing a carefully constructed conjoint experiment, the authors uncover how wealthier citizens can be incentivized to support property taxation, demonstrating the importance of social recognition, the framing of tax benefits, and the exclusion of NGO from tax collection efforts. This work stands out not only for its methodological rigor, but also for its deep theoretical grounding. It thoughtfully connects taxation to core concepts such as state legitimacy, the social contract, and economic redistribution. In doing so, it bridges academic theory and policy relevance in a way that is both accessible and impactful. The ISA created this new award to spotlight exceptional scholarship, especially from emerging scholars and those working in or on the Global South. Dr. Lopez Garcia and Behrens exemplify the spirit of this award through their innovative research and clear contribution to both scholarly and policy debates. Congratulations on this well-deserved recognition.
Well, we are very honored, especially to receive this award, especially of what's happening in Haiti at the time in which we conducted the survey. So we're very honored to receive this, but also we hope that this paper helps the people in Haiti to overcome some of the problems, and apart from informing scholarship. So I think it meets well with the conference theme of bringing back the evidence and how we can use evidence in order to solve some of the global problems. But thank you so much. And I was very happy and honored to work with Sarah. Sarah, you want to say something?
Yeah, also from my side, thank you so much. This is a huge honor and came very unexpectedly. And then, yeah, this is a wonderful recognition. And also thank you for the very kind words on our work. So I also need to thank Anna for bringing me in on this project, as she was the one who started with the idea to study tax preferences in Haiti with survey data, and we designed the survey experiment together. And we were also very while we were in the field collecting the survey data, this insurrection happened and the outbreak of violence in Haiti happened. And it was an exceptional circumstance that we were then in the field and were able also to explore the pre and post insurrection period, which allows us to better understand how institutional breakdown, institutional failure influences people's tax preferences. So yeah, we very much hope that the evidence that we found will be helpful also for policymakers to find cost-effective strategies that we identified in terms of the role of social recognition in order to increase tax support among those who have the capacities to pay, which are the wealthy. So thank you so much for this recognition, which will hopefully help us to get more attention for the work that we conducted in Haiti. Thank you.
So, hi guys, I'm Praveen Khadka. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Essex in the UK. Currently, I'm in Nepal, where I'm from, Kathmandu, Nepal. So, as Professor Wagner said, we had 15, excellent submissions, and of course, Anna and Sarah's work their work was awarded the prize. But then we also recognized there were two additional work that really stood out. And in light of the strengths of these two submissions, the committee, Professor Wagner, Professor Lana, and myself, we felt it is important to communicate our appreciation to both Sunil and Eli, right, by informing them of their honorable mention status. Even though the prize itself is not monetary, we hope that this is going to encourage continued engagement and scholarship in the field. So I just want to briefly talk first about Eli's paper. His paper was titled Solar Energy as National Security in the Israel-Palestinian Conflict. Eli's paper explores an innovative and policy-relevant topic, which is how national security considerations and territorial politics shape renewable energy strategies in conflict-affected settings. Eli demonstrates through a very strong and compelling comparative analysis how solar technologies serve distinct political functions across Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. In Israel, panels decentralize power production to protect critical infrastructure. In the West Bank, large-scale on-grid systems serve as symbols of sovereignty. And in pre-conflict Gaza, off-grid solar installations sustained essential services during chronic energy shortages. I myself worked for the UN 2 years in Gaza, so I can actually say that this is very true, Eli, so very commendable what I witnessed in Gaza in 2012. Eli's work is data-rich, analytical, sharp, and goes beyond descriptive accounts by advancing two core research questions about the securitization of energy policy. So, Eli, congratulations. Would you want to speak? And then I talk about Sunil's paper.
Thank you, Pravin, for those really kind and thoughtful words, and thank you to the committee and to the ISA for giving me this award. I've always seen energy, especially clean energy, as a tool for cooperation more than conflict. I started this research before the war began, and unfortunately, most of my findings and observations about Gaza are no longer relevant because most of the solar panels there are destroyed. However, solar panels are also the first thing that are allowed to go back in now in Gaza because they're seen as the main source for electricity. So hopefully it'll also be part of the reconstruction of Gaza that hopefully will start as soon as possible and the war will end. And energy can once again become a tool of cooperation and growth and stability. So thank you again for giving me this award.
Thank you, Eli, for some of your insights. I now would like to move to Sunil's paper. Sunil Vaswani, an independent scholar from Mumbai, India, submitted a paper titled The Logic of Nehruvian Internationalism. We as a committee agree that this was a conceptually rich and historically grounded analysis of Prime Minister Nehru's foreign policy. Sunil moved beyond the familiar narrative of non-alignment, and he cleverly weaved together themes of anti-colonialism, Commonwealth engagement, and Nehru's complex relationship with especially China, showing how these strands were closely tied to domestic democratic concerns. Sunil's paper provides a nuanced interpretation of Nehruvian internationalism within the broader Cold War context, while also assessing its limitations, including its failure to prevent the Sino-Indian conflict. In linking Nehru's global diplomacy with the political and economic challenges of India's early democratic experiment, Sunil cleverly offered a novel and compelling argument. So, Sunil, congratulations, sir.
Thank you very much, Praveen, and thank you to the committee as well. I'll just keep it brief. I hope this paper, Nehru is a very misunderstood figure, particularly in contemporary India, and I hope that this paper, once it hopefully gets published, can provide a corrective to some of the current interpretations of Nehru and Nehruvian foreign policy, and perhaps move the conversation in a more productive direction. Nehru wrote far too much, and it was quite tedious to go through the many volumes, but I'm very happy to get this award, and it was certainly worth all the effort. Thank you very much to the committee.
I just wanted to say, right, congrats to everyone, since I didn't get a chance to say that earlier on. And that one of the important things about having the virtual conference to begin with is that it helps, bring in people from all around the world who would not be able normally to attend the single conference that ISA has, right? It's very expensive. And of course, there are visa issues, etc. But the second thing is that each of your papers, as someone who has been in ISA for a very, very long time and founded the Global South Caucus and so on, each of your papers has been already relevant. I hope that they get published because it has been already relevant in that I certainly have mentioned each of your papers in certain policy situations that I have been in. For example, smaller Caribbean states are interested in the solar project, the use of small solar mechanisms, right, rather than massive networks. And so that has been very important. Haiti is a continual problem, a continual issue. So I'm pointing to some of the policy implications, right? And of course, in terms of India, I'm personally involved in a non-alignment project right now, having returned from Indonesia not long ago, which is attempting to use non-alignment and to use the Afro-Asian Conference as their center of their foreign policy from now on. So I think it is just important when we look at these papers that we look at of course, we focused primarily on the theory, on the methodology, on the academic side of it, but there's what's interesting in each of these papers, there's also policy implication. So I think that's a great way for us to move forward with the virtual conference coming up in terms of the kind of papers that we are looking for. I just want, since this will be recorded for the opening session, to remind people that there's a new Best Paper Award cycle beginning, and that please check the ISA site for the criteria. That new selection process is going to take place, and it's going to be October 1st as the deadline. We will have, the award agreed on by December the 1st. So we thank you very much for being in the foreground, right? You were the first recipients of this award. I also want to thank the former president, Marika Bruning, who initiated this award. We didn't have this award before, and we're continuing it. And I wish you all success, those of you who are attending virtual 2025 conference.
By way of conclusion, I invite you to join our work as you are able. I encourage you to go to the ISA Forward Fund on our website if you have the means to contribute to a more accessible association by making a donation. For example, to double your annual membership fee so that students, early career scholars, and scholars from historically resource-deprived institutions have access. I also encourage you to take leadership in the association. Contact me or the president directly if you are interested in working with your colleagues, for example, as program chairs for next year's virtual conference or serving on the Conference Best Paper Awards Committee. I also invite you to look out for our new initiative, our resource page for academics, which will be launched later this year and provide valuable information for achieving a rewarding and successful career in and outside academia. I wish each of you a successful and rewarding engagement through our virtual conference and hope to see you during the sessions ahead. Welcome, and thank you all for being here.